Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm your host, Oscar Hazel, and we're doing this live after the Bills game, or a couple of hours after. Joined by Ian Wharton, who you can follow at NFL Film Study, and you can find his work at Bleacher Report, draftcentric.weebly.com. You can follow the show at MiamiPod, themiamipod.com, and you can donate if you want to help us keep running at themiamipod.com/donate. That would be your host, Oscar Hazel. Oh, shit. Something's going on. So that was noisy. Sorry about that, but we'll just keep going. So we're doing this live, so then we'll answer any of your questions. So if anyone's watching live, just tweet at MiamiPod any of your questions and we'll get to them as we're going along. Can sense kind of like a shift to more off-season stuff, although we've kind of been doing that for a month now, so that's no change for us. So what was the score? I mean, it was a pretty bad game. So the Bills won 33-17. What was kind of like your initial takeaway from the game, Ian?
Oh, sorry, as I cleared my throat. Yeah, so initial takeaway, this was a big game, just like in terms of this is your pivot point of the season. Like this is where you make your statement. Who are we as a team? Are we a pretender? Are we a contender? Obviously, the two big wins, we both kind of expected, at least. Well, I know that you would pick the Titans, but like I know that you weren't surprised how that game unfolded, especially once Mariota was hurt.
Yeah, the game changed completely.
Yeah. So, taking that all into consideration, we also knew though that New England was probably going to be an ugly game. If Miami lost that game, how they did, we both sat here a week ago and we said, is this very surprising? No. I mean, Patriots are just playing some of the best football they've played in the Bill Belichick era. And like Miami just fired their court, we talked about this, fired their coach. So, I mean, they're just in a different place developmentally. So I think this was a big game. This was a game where you say, okay, you lose this game, your season's officially basically done. What I learned about this team is the whole rah-rah spirit. It's worn off. The physicality is gone for the most part. The big impact plays that we saw, Miami had a couple off those screen plays, but overall, it was a very conservative team, I thought, especially on offense. We really didn't see them open it up until the game was basically already over. And they had some good success with the screens, but, it was basically Derek Carr back in Fresno State style offense, minus like the random deep shots here and there. It's just a severely lacking team. And when I say that is coaches, players, this was a bad game in terms of like your weaknesses. This was an ugly game where your worst positions really were exploited, and Miami had a chance, man. Like they were in this game. Like they didn't get bad play from the quarterback. They got some good impact plays from Lamar Miller. Not a ton of running. I don't have the numbers on it, but it felt like the balance was a little bit off. But they were trying to use the quick passes and such as a run. There's always something that goes wrong with this offense. It's Jason Fox, or it's Tannehill's fumble, or it's a drop pass here or there. Like it is just unbelievable to me how this regime, and I still categorize this year under the Philbin regime just because it's his coordinators, it's his staff. A lot of these players are people that he has had impact, and there's a reason why these players are here because of him. And just through this Philbin era, I'm just amazed actually how these issues continuously happen. 4 or 5 years. It's like, man, like this was probably a big. This is probably, like I said, this was a big loss in terms of now the approach that they should really start to be taking. Because I think this was like your statement game. Like I said, one way or the other.
So I guess my issue offensively, this seems to kind of happen where Laser just kind of gets into doing one thing. So it was just a bunch of screens and some running plays, and it was pretty balanced early on. But because everything's screens, quick passing, and running, the box is so condensed, the field is so condensed. Then when you get behind, you start being more vertical, less running, still screens, and then that got closer. But you need to run, have screens, have vertical elements. There needs to be kind of it has to be some richness to the offense, and it's just really thin, and gets into like these ruts of doing the same kind of very like linear attack, having like some richness to it. So that was kind of my issue offensively. It's just, we've seen this the whole time where early on in games, it's the root concepts are so compact, and then once you get behind, obviously because of the botch snap, there's the first play you got behind early, so it's good that they actually ran, and they weren't running particularly well at the beginning, although Miller kind of was like averaging 3 yards a play, which is like perfectly fine. That keeps you on schedule. They were using it was just running game and screen game pretty much for the first couple of drives. So basically, and like the screen game is something we haven't seen like a massive amount of, or not in terms of using Lamar Miller in the screen game anyway. I think he ends up having like 7 catches today, pretty much all in the flats. But it's like we've wanted that, but not in a way in which it becomes ridiculously predictable. And obviously it was effective. Landry was using that away as well. It was interesting. Landry had a lot of rushes as well. I mean, I think he had like 4 rushes that weren't particularly successful, but I guess having that, at least using that element, then it adds another kind of action that defense has to counter. But I mean, like, the game just got out of hand so quickly, and partly because the Bills could just run the ball, and then like 10 times they decided to throw it and got huge chunk plays, which meant that they could keep running the ball. And like there's so my like big contention with Dan Campbell is he really wants to play kind of veterans, and I think this is something we talked about before, and like I agree with like the rah-rah thing. It's like that's only going to last whilst you're winning. Once you're losing, like that just gets gnawing, and these guys are like professionals and they want to be treated like professionals at some extent, and like you can't keep doing the same thing when you're losing. It's just going to get boring for them. So I think that was like going to happen. But Campbell, like being a player, and like you see the way in which players talk about young players, it's like very derogatory. And I think we're seeing that in terms of his usage and just playing OV pretty much the whole game at right defensive end. Just teams could run down his gut, and like not to play Terrence Fede at all. Like I didn't see one snap where he was at right defensive end, and he's just so much better at the point of attack, like containing the edge, just playing the run. And we just got like gashed to that side. So that was a big issue, I think. And yeah, they could just run on us the whole time, and it wasn't. And then Brent Grimes got abused by Sammy Watkins as well. And I guess this is like another thing where it's with Sammy Watkins, most of his big plays came from when Grimes was close to the line of scrimmage. And I guess this is kind of like for the crowd that were asking, why aren't we in press all the time? Well, because we don't have players that can succeed in press. As the first chunk play, Sammy Watkins got right inside Grimes's pads, pushed them off, and at the line is like within the first 5 yards, and then Grimes is trailing, and to try and chase down Sammy Watkins, he loses his balance because Sammy Watkins is much faster than him. Watkins made that amazing like fumbling catch, and then the second time it was just like on a release, just beat him. And so that's why they were playing off because you give yourself some cushion and you can make plays breaking on the ball. So there you go. For all the people that are asking why we didn't play press, Sammy Watkins destroying Brent Grimes is why we didn't play press.
Yep. Played as your personnel.
Yeah. So people always talk about like bad coaching. Like today we saw bad coaching.
Yes, it was bad.
Yeah.
Today honestly might have been like the worst coach game we've seen all season. Like if you look at time management and everything.
And that's to be expected. It's like the special teams was awful, and that's because Rizzi is now basically the assistant head coach and making a lot of like head coach decisions. So he must have like more things to do like during the week than he would have normally had that he could spend on like making sure people can play special teams. And pretty much everything. I mean, this is like a league-wide thing where there's issues with just flags on special teams. The special team plays horrendous, but it doesn't help when your special teams coordinator is doing other stuff. I thought the Fide holding call was pretty weak, but that's neither here nor there. There's like another 10 penalties. We'll see later on all 22, like how many of them are bad. But it's just, it was like, there wasn't really much good in terms of coaching. I guess like people had like a hoo-ha about the end of the half. What was your feel on that? Like at the time I didn't really mind. I understand why you take the timeout, but my theory is if you think you've got a nice matchup and it was a good play, it was just to the wrong player. Again, that's like a personnel thing. There was like so there's the play that they ran just before the 2 seconds went out. I know that was a pick, the pass interference. That was to Rashard Matthews, but then it was the third. So like the Rashard Matthews play, that makes sense to me. It's fine to run out the clock when you have that play because that was a like relatively good matchup. It would have been a touchdown if it wasn't for a pass interference. So they had obviously a look and a play they liked, so they ran it. Whereas if you have a timeout, then you don't know what the defense is going to set out, and there's a bit more kind of options. So from like a strategic standpoint, I didn't mind that. Obviously, if you take the timeout, then you get more plays. So probably for percentage-wise, it's better. But from like a game feel, if you feel you have a good matchup, I don't mind taking that risk. But then like throwing to Sims 3 times in clutch situations is just, again, it's the same as Grimes, not giving him a cushion. It's like you're playing against your skills. It's like if you don't have Dion Sims as your primary read in any play.
Yeah, that was really ugly, man, and that ball was spot on. Like you can't get that ball into a better place, better timing. Only Sims could get it, hit him right in the hands. He had good velocity on that throw. Oh man, that was such a killer drop. It was a really bad time management as far as I think they could have taken the timeout at like 19 seconds, if I remember correctly. They could have ran 2 or 3 plays off of that.
Generally, you get 2.
Yeah, 2 is like the safe number. Yeah. You may have gotten that third play, just depending on, like, for example, if you did like a fade. I'm sure one of those plays would have been a fade.
Most certainly. Like
the worst fucking play ever on the goal line for this Dolphins team. But yeah, like I just thought that was brutal because you just limited your options. Like I don't mind going for it for the points there. Like again, you're in the point in the season where it's make or break. And I'm okay with being aggressive. Like if you're going to be aggressive, just be aggressive. Like win your way. I'm all for that. I truly believe in that. I'm okay with calculated risks. I just wasn't a fan of the play call, and not so much because of how it resulted. I just wasn't a fan of you're not playing to your biggest strength. And your biggest strength, obviously, there was you need to play either a Devontae Parker there, a Rashard Matthews there, Jarvis Landry, who had a great game. Was very impressed with his ability to win at the catch point tonight or today. But to even Jordan Cameron, who's really struggled with drops this year, it's still better than even Damian Williams would have been a better option than Deion Sims there. I mean, that was just a brutal usage of personnel in that situation. That's what really bothered me, is you're not setting your team up for the most success. It's okay that you didn't convert it. It's just it makes it difficult to swallow when you didn't put yourself in the best chance to succeed. So I think that was my biggest. Again, I would have loved the timeout. I think that more chances, the better. I mean, I think everyone was screaming that on Twitter, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. That's a rookie mistake as a head coach. Someone on the staff, even someone on the field, probably should have called that timeout.
But to me, that my read of that situation is because Lay's obviously called a play, so they obviously saw a matchup, had a play they liked, called it, and then ran it. So that's like, okay, we like something here, let's go for it. And it would have worked if it wasn't for a pass interference. So like although you're getting less chances if you think you've got a higher % chance, considering that the next play was a slant to Deion Sims, it probably was a higher % chance to Rashard than the Sims. And just to put in context, I'm pretty sure Sims has like a 50-50 drop catch ratio. So it's just ridiculous, and that's going to be made worse today. Like even that out and up, like to any other, like you run that for, if you like that play, you run it for Cameron, you don't run it for Sims. He's just like ploddy and bad hands. So yeah, I thought like the Deion Sims usage was pretty irritating, and like the fact they've got away from Cameron vertically. I know he has some injury problems, but like use him less and use him in that way. They're still using him as an inline blocker, which I mean he's been better than I thought he would be, but like if you're worried about his injuries, you don't use him in those situations. You use one of the other 3 tight ends you had active for this game, and you use Cameron where he stresses the defense the most, and that's vertically. So it was just, I thought that was frustrating. Should we talk about some positive stuff before we get to some people's questions? Jay Ajayi, Pickle Juice. We saw him after being on IR designated to return. He looks good, which is not surprising as he's a really good player. Pretty decisive, running through the hole, good second level vision from like the couple plays we saw. That innate balance, even when he looks out of control, we saw it with that kind of like spin move, and then he still makes, it's like an out of control spin and still makes 5 yards. There was like a load of that in Boise where he's like running down the sidelines, like spinning 3 times, hands on the floor, but still getting positive yardage. So it was good to see Jay Ajayi and not Jonas Gray. So that was one smart coaching decision. Hopefully Gray won't be on the roster soon. I don't see any reason for him to be rostered anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good way of putting it.
Was there anyone else that kind of stood out to you as a good performance? I guess like if you want to look at young player negatives, Bryce playing over Bobby McCain, that just seems like a step backwards.
Yeah.
Fade not playing. Chris McCain looking terrible as an edge player. And there's a reason why the staff were trying to make him an off-ball linebacker, and he just can't pass rush with hand down. He just has no moves, has no bend. There's times he tries to rush the passer without making any contact with the defensive line. You can do that occasionally if it's designed, but he's literally just running back and forth trying to like outrun a tackle. And as bad as NFL offensive linemen are, but they're able to beat that easily. So I don't even know why he was playing when you have Fade. For some reason they don't like Fade, Dan Campbell.
Yeah, it's really weird. I'm not. I mean, like you said, though, they're like. I don't know why they think that. I get that you trust veterans more. It's just Fide's playing better, and that's the thing. It's like maybe he's been late to meetings. Maybe he's not been good in practice. Maybe that's it. I don't know. We're not
They're
there.
playing him out of position as well. He should, like, he played the whole time at Marist at right defensive end. They're playing him at left defensive end
Yeah,
now.
he is a pure strong side defensive
Yeah.
end. Like that's what Terrence Fide's career will be based off of. Strong, strong run defender. You want him. I mean, this is a dude that bullies the supposed strongest man on the offensive line for many teams. Not all teams. Some people have like the right guard as the strongest, or you'll see some variance there. But generally, the right tackle is going to be that mauler. Um, you really want Fide to be setting the edges, um, and just using that length, man. That length that he has is so impressive, and how he can hit those hands in a man's chest and drive him back. Like he's not an amazing pass rusher yet, but this is where he's going to learn it. Got to give him those reps. Got to give him the chance to learn it. There's no upside to playing guys like Vernon, or I'm not going to say Shelby. I like Shelby playing. But I mean, even a guy like McCain, there's not as much upside there as there is for Fide. And honestly, the floor for those guys is worse than it is for a guy like Fide. I mean, he's playing well. Like he should be a rotational player in this league already, which is really impressive considering where he came from.
Was there anyone else that, I guess, like Sue had a pretty good game? That one bull rush with one hand where he just drove back I think it was the center. That was pretty incredible. Obviously had kind of like I guess it would be like a ticky-tacky call where he was like trying not to throw Tyrod to the floor and then kind of horse-collared. But I thought Sue played pretty well. Not really anyone else, and Rashad Jones as normal kind of played well, but like early on there was a lot of bad angles. I don't think anyone really played well defensively the first kind of half, really. Jenkins took some bad angles, Grimes took some bad angles.
Yeah, the angles and the run fits were really bad for that second and third level. There were some runs where Carlos Williams and LaShawn McCoy, like it was crazy. Like especially the first LaShawn McCoy big run, I think it was like that 48-yard touchdown. Like there were guys right there, and they were just completely out of position, and McCoy was just running straight downfield. So that was bizarre.
That was one play when Fide was in and he almost got a shoelace tackle right at the line of scrimmage, and then like everyone else was late from there on. Or just like, yeah, it's almost like they didn't realize that Sean McCoy is fast.
Right.
Which is kind of hard to imagine, not believing Shady's fast. Jamal Taylor didn't really get targeted at all, really, did he? So I guess that's maybe good in one sense, bad in the sense that they felt they had such a gross mismatch of Grimes and Sammy Watkins. Grimes shadowed Sammy pretty much everywhere other than the slot. So they did motion Sammy Watkins into the slot a couple of times pre-snap to get Sammy Watkins onto Bryce McCain. But generally, every time they did that, it just happened to be a running play. So that was kind of interesting. I guess there was that one deep crosser against cover 3 where Michael Thomas just didn't pick up Sammy quick enough on the crosser when Grimes passed it on. So that's just kind of like bad communication, and that becomes another issue of when your corners are shadowing, then the communication changes, like what players are expecting, like the zone that they're covering maybe changes. So another issue that has kind of happened since there was the first Bills game where Grimes first started shadowing, right? In London, or the Jets game in London.
Yeah.
Brandon Marshall
coming off or right before the bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, we've seen kind of quite a few big plays come from miscommunication from when Grimes has been playing the other side of the field, whether it's Nate Washington or Jamal Taylor or something else. So that's just something to keep watching when you see kind of matchups like that. What's happening like outside of that Grimes actually playing the other player is like there's repercussions throughout the defense. Shepherd played quite a bit. I thought he didn't look terrible, but it's such an indictment on like this team that Jordan Tripp was playing meaningful downs for the Jaguars, and then we've got like Kelvin Shepherd and Kaimisi being pretty bad. I think Shepherd had a better game, but I mean, it's like there's not much future in him. But again, Campbell, so this is like one question. I think we talked about this. So this is from Bobby Krause asking if Campbell is coaching to win games or the locker room, and why are we seeing much of the same? He's playing to win games, and that's to a detriment to the team's future. And so hopefully now there's like, he just gets told, okay, like we're going to move in a different direction, and gives him like a developmental mandate. So that's what you've got to hope to see. We'll see that if we start seeing younger players play.
And the kind of like the upside for him, if you're wondering and you're saying, well, why would Campbell not want to coach to win? Well, yeah, I mean, he definitely wants the full-time job. He made that clear. Obviously, I don't blame him. I mean, you only get so many chances to be the head football coach so many times, and maybe this is his one and only chance. Maybe he'll get future chances down the road. But from his perspective, it should be, I need to do what's best for this franchise because Miami may retain him next year. There's nothing.
Especially if Sean Payton is hired. He'll almost.
Yeah, if they get Sean Payton, I would actually be stunned if he wasn't retained. So,
when we touch on Sean Payton, there was something we brought up on the, it was almost a month ago now on the Sean Payton show, where there was like a reported out on his contract saying that if the GM were to leave, he can, and apparently the NFL had vetoed it, but Ian Rappaport, I think, reported that that's still, like, the Saints would let him go, and that's kind of the reason. And I think partly because the GM's more focused on their NBA team now, and maybe even the ownership kind of change, or the ownership turmoil is like another reason to be out. So Sean Payton got a bit more realistic, as you don't really need to send assets, and losing to the Titans today maybe sours the taste. So yeah, I just thought I'd make a note of that just to like confirm, because we kind of like were loose about that the first time, but yeah, it's being confirmed now by sources. So I just thought I'd know that. But anyway, you were going on about Campbell and Payton.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, no, yeah, I was just kind of saying like that's the upside for him. Is if the franchise says, look, we need you to develop these players. You have a future. You may have a future here. That's the upside play for him, is that you continue to have a job. Quite frankly, what you don't want to be is you don't want to be the interim that says, screw it, I'm just going to play the vets till the end of the year, and then you really screwed the franchise because you just cost your guys like 400 valuable snaps that this franchise and the next regime or Mike Tannenbaum needs to make decisions. Like, that would just be catastrophic. Honestly, like, that would be the worst case scenario, is if he continues to try to win when the season's quote unquote over, because you've got to figure out what you have in these young guys. Like Jamil Douglas, eventually you want to work him in somewhere in the rotation, whether he's just rotating in like for a half, or you want to get these guys some sort of snaps, because they need to at least have some film out there for the next crew, because you don't want to start burning through picks from the last few years. That's exactly how teams like, for example, like the Browns, and I'm just using this as a random example. It's nothing against the Browns here. For example, the Browns, who constantly change coaching staffs, and then you see players like Dion Lewis. Of course, I know he had injury issues in Cleveland, but you'll see like Dion Lewis go to the Patriots and catch on. But it's because he didn't have much film available in Cleveland, and so when a new staff comes in and takes over, they don't know about him, or they didn't maybe go thoroughly through his tape, which you can't blame them. They already have guys that they want. They already have archetypes that they're going to play to. So that's the thing, is like, you want to give no excuses for the next staff to say, hey, we played these guys. You know what they are. If you want to give up on them, that's fine. But at least you have to go through X amount of data as opposed to very little to work off of. And like, even a guy like Chris McCain, like, he hasn't been good, but I would be fine with him playing even a little bit more. If you really believe in him as a franchise.
If he's like Sam, if he was playing Sam, then
and we saw today why he probably shouldn't, why he's not a defensive end actually, and that was the difference between McCain and Deion Jordan. So there was a play specifically where McCain tried to speed rush, go around the defensive, or the I think it was the right tackle, off the top of my head, and he tried to bend the edge and actually use his flexibility, and there was nothing there. He just basically fell on his face. So like, that's why you saw Deion Jordan, though, playing so much defensive end, because he can bend. He's got the strength. He's got the length. He's not like super bendy like a Cam Wake is, but he's got enough bend to play defensive end and be like that quote-unquote creator type that I like to talk about, where a guy that like makes other things happen for others. Now, obviously, he wasn't at that dominant level yet, and maybe, who knows if he'll ever get there. But that's a special trait. You don't see that type of trait often. So it's like, those are the type of guys that you want to play. You want to play Walt Aikens because he's got the physical upside. And so you have to give these guys mental reps, physical reps, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I just don't have faith that he's going to do that.
It's really frustrating when like Bobby McCain was probably one of the top 5 players against New England, and then doesn't play the next week.
It doesn't make sense.
He like clearly earned it from tape, and played really well, played better than, we didn't really get challenged in the slot today. So, he wouldn't have got many looks, but just like running against different receivers and the Bills, who you're going to play twice a year, it's probably good to have a player that's going to face the Bills another 6 times in his rookie contract. It might be useful to get him reps against those players. So it's just frustrating when like a young player's clearly earned snaps and then is just not playing because Bryce McCain is playing in the slot. At least they kept Jamar Taylor out on the perimeter and didn't move back to Bryce. I thought that was kind of, it was rumored he was going to start, or it was on the team sheet that he was going to start, but obviously that was just starting nickel. So at least that was like one positive, that they're sticking with Jamar, because I think knowing what you have in Jamar is more important than seeing whether Bryce can like get back to the level he was playing for that half a season. There's not. I showed talk on Tannehill, so he played pretty good. I guess there's a couple of like mistakes in maybe forcing passes into like tighter than normal coverage, but they were generally on third down plays. So, and again, you'll see more kind of clarity when you get all 22. But that was just kind of like my feel. There was a couple of passes, but then with the pass rush as well, and because they're third down, you're getting, with Rex Ryan, on third down a blitz is coming, so there's going to be pressure. So it makes sense to kind of, if you see a small window, and Tannehill has a propensity to throw into small windows anyway, which is can be a very good trait, and has made some of his biggest plays have been throwing small window passes, and he has the ability to do it. But like a couple of times it didn't work out. So I guess that could be one thing. And then like the fumble seems to be a recurring thing with the Bills is sack fumbles ending games pretty much. And that's kind of, to me, that the fumble, it's hard to like be trying to throw a ball and protecting it when your tackle's getting beaten in a second and a half. So I don't think he could have really done much with that. And that play was horrible. That screen to Deion Sims.
Yeah, again, you're getting a guy with almost no upside on a play. But yeah, I mean, I thought Tannehill played all right. Here's the thing: is like he's played like this every week. And I don't say that as a negative. Like he's played well enough, I think, for the offense to be competent. I mean, and I'm really surprised actually. Like they're only putting up 7 or 14 points a week, and then I go back and look at the penalties, and you go back and you look at the situational sacks, and some of that stuff is on different players. I mean, I'm not gonna just sit here and be like, oh yeah, it's on X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's on the whole unit. Everyone's made mistakes in crucial moments, and that's what's really handicapped this team. They've done well as far as they've done a better job of sustaining drives as they've been more balanced. I like how they're incorporating Lamar Miller. Obviously, Jay Ajayi was fantastic. Really, really, really happy that he got out there and played well. I think that Tannehill, Miller, and Ajayi, man, that's a nice foundation moving forward. If you have the right coach in there, and I'm not even saying like a Sean Payton coach, I'm saying like a good offensive coordinator head coach. So like people who should be attainable: Kyle Shanahan, Hugh Jackson, a bevy of others that we've talked about on this show. There are numerous others that I'd be happy with, but those two guys obviously stand out. Then if you factor in, who knows? Let's say the pie in the sky happens, and you get Sean Payton. Man, that's a nasty, nasty backfield. I love that potential there. But I think as far as Tannehill, look, man, I like that he's willing to throw into tight windows. To me, on a quarterback prospect, that's one of the first things I look for. Is he willing to let his receiver go get that ball? Because look at what the great quarterbacks do. I mean, you got to let your playmakers go get the ball at some point. Tony Romo has had a fantastic career doing that. Now, I'm not saying Tannehill is the next Tony Romo. I'm not saying all that. But I'm saying, though, you don't want a quarterback that's afraid to make that throw, because those are the guys that get run out of the league in 2, 3, 4 years. And sometimes you're going to lose on that throw, and it's okay. It's all like I'm okay with that. Now, I didn't like the fumble. The fumble was really ugly. Those type of plays, especially against the Bills, seem to happen, especially when the right tackle gets beaten like right away. Flashbacks to like 2 years ago. Those type of plays are what you really, really don't want to see, period. But I mean, just in general, I thought he played well enough to win. It's just hard, man. It's hard when and I'm not saying that Tannehill's not to blame. I'm not saying that. Again, I'm not going to sit here and defend Tannehill mercilessly, but
Well, I'd like to say like one thing on kind of like whether like personally, I don't think you can judge whether a quarterback can carry a team when they're like not in a position to win a game. When you're chasing a game, then there's like nothing. Like if Tannehill was in the situations that Matt Ryan has been in pretty much every week, and they were losing every week, then you can say, okay, like this is not like he cannot elevate the team. But they're not in late game situations where he's in a position to win a game. Therefore, like to me, that's what is carrying a team, is when you're down 7-10 points in the last 10 minutes, can he elevate his game or like still execute when the pressure is on? We're not seeing those situations, so I don't see how you can evaluate whether you can like take a team to a next level when they're not in like losing by 20 points unless your quarterback throws like 4 picks. It can never be on the quarterback, in my opinion. Or it has to be like some crazy turn of events and literally just the quarterback not throwing any completions. If like, I don't know how many completions he threw, but there was like, so 27 out of 36, that's a pretty good like completion rate. And if you count, there's probably like 4 or 5 drops in there.
Yeah, I had him at, let me see here. I had him at 86% accuracy. I mean, 31 of 36 passes, and I know a lot of those were behind the line of scrimmage. I think I had, let's check real quick here. I had 10.
And this is kind of another thing. Like the quarterback doesn't decide where the progression starts.
Right.
And so there's a couple of people like talking about how, I think it was on the slant Landry where Stills was open on a crosser, but Landry's the first read. If he thinks he can hit that, you hit it. You don't go. You can't say, okay, I'll pause this and maybe I'll hit that if like there's nothing else there. You either hit it then or you move on to something else that may not exist. So just in case, like for the people that screenshot people open, it doesn't really matter if someone's open if they're not looking that way for a while.
Right. Now, one thing you do maybe want is quicker reads. That I think is fair. I think that's a fair. Now, not again, if it's a 3-step drop, the ball's coming out. It's first, maybe second read, maybe 5-step drop. You're maybe hitting a third read.
And generally, you're hitting the second read if the coverage is different than your pre-snap read of the coverage.
Yes.
Like it's very rare that you get the coverage you're expecting and you're not hitting the first read because you should expecting where the defender is going to be. And like clearly the offense, like they know where they're running to, so there's an inherent advantage. So yeah, there just seems to be kind of like any kind of negative play seems to be, and like I mean the quarterback touches the ball every time, so to some extent it's fair. But I mean I don't think we're seeing Tannehill at his best, and maybe that's like and partly because he's not in a situation to really show his best because it's like generally quarterbacks play their best, and Tannehill's played his best in the clutch. That's kind of how football generally works.
Yeah.
So then if you want to take like a positive away, it's like, well, he's playing well and like we've seen him play better and he can play better. So that's like one positive. Again, like the last thing I'm worried about is Tannehill with this team.
Yeah, it is not. He's not the problem now. Can you upgrade on Tannehill? And I've said this before, and I will continue to say, if you can find a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill, feel free to go after him. Like, I'm okay with that. If you honestly think, if the new coach comes in, and we talked about this with Jared Goff when we talked about Sean Payton, I think that Payton and Goff would be the ideal matching as far as coaching and player skill set. But so like if for example he were to come in and he were to say, you know, guys, I like Tannehill, we can start him next year, but I'm going to take Jared Goff and we're going to see what happens with Tannehill this year. And then you're stuck, you know, then you're quote unquote stuck with like a Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers situation all over again. Let's say, you know, Tannehill plays well. That's not ideal because then you quote unquote wasted a first round pick on a quarterback. But you know, if a coach comes in and feels that way, it's okay. Like I can feel okay with that as long as there's just reasoning about it. You can't just get rid of a good quarterback just to get rid of him. Like that's insane. Like you can't just be like, I'm going to go draft Connor Cook and we're just going to trade off Tannehill immediately to Cleveland or something. Unless if you're getting like an insane draft haul. Unless if you're getting 2 first-round picks for Tannehill, maybe even more, you're not getting fair value for him. Again, he's a top 15 quarterback every week. Like, that's his floor. His floor is a top 15 quarterback. So just consider what happens when this offense plays well, which we've seen a few times. Go back last year, 2014, half of his games were really good games. Okay, so go back to then and then come back to me and say, oh man, yeah, this guy's not good enough. Bullshit.
And then in his contract, 7 of the other top 15 quarterbacks are going to be retiring. And I don't think there's going to be that many that are going to be replacing them that caliber. And like, if you even think about how many of the best quarterbacks are old, like it's a position that ages really well at the moment. It's like Carson Palmer is playing his best football. He's 35.
Yep.
So there's like someone I think tweeted last week. It's like if like if Tannehill's not playing his best, what's he waiting for? And then like followed that up with when I said like quarterbacks like play better when they're older. He's like, what quarterback gets better at age 27? It's like every single one.
Every single one of them, right? Look at all the top quarterbacks right now. Tom Brady, what is he, like 37, 38? Aaron Rodgers, he's like 32, I think. Carson Palmer, like you said, 38.
Like, Phillips, Peyton,
Rivers,
Eli.
Young 30s. Yeah, Eli, yeah, mid 30s. Who's the other one? Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, well,
30s.
he's maybe died today.
No, he's only out a couple of weeks apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, man. Like, there's a reason why these players get better with age. Their mind processes things. Their teams understand them even more. They say, okay, here's your strengths. We've gone through some coaches now. We've experienced some shit together. We're going to go out and get somebody that can complement your skill set better. Look at the case of Ben Roethlisberger, man. Like, and I'm a big Ben fan. Okay, I am, like, as far as on the field play. But look at what his career. By the way. What's that?
You said Big Ben fan. That was a good.
Yeah. I'm getting better at that stuff. But no, like, think of it this way too. Like, what was he before Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and Heath Miller becoming the third option in the offense and Martavis Bryant? Like, he was a good player, but he was closer to who Tannehill is now than what Big Ben is now. So sometimes, too, like, it's okay to say this guy's a great player. And this player has great players around him. And he's got an offensive coordinator who plays perfectly to his strengths. Like, sometimes all that happens in one. And when that happens, that's magical. It really is. Like I love watching the Steelers play offense. Like, they are just so fun to watch. It's incredibly difficult to achieve. I'm not saying that it's not.
And they had a really rough year as well, that first year.
When Todd Haley was almost fired. Yeah, Todd Haley was almost fired. He didn't get along with Haley. The production just wasn't there. But that's why you keep a quarterback when they show flashes. Like, and here's the difference too for me between a guy like Tannehill and Stafford. So Matt Stafford to me is who I think this fan base feels like Tannehill is, but he's not. Tannehill has way too many flashes. Tannehill has flashed more in 2014 than Matt Stafford has since that huge year, like, what was it, like 3 years ago, when he had like 50-some touchdowns and whatever. But he was basically just chucking it up to Calvin Johnson and company and just letting them win. I mean, he didn't really flash so much as he was just like kind of Johnny Football in college. Like, he was Johnny Football in the NFL before Johnny Football was even in college. So it's just, there's a lot to consider. And these quarterbacks take time, man. You got to give these guys time when they show those flashes. I mean, Cutler's had a whole career of random flashes and teams giving him massive contracts because of smaller flashes than what Ryan Tannehill has shown.
Oh, and then like Kaepernick had like a Super Bowl run when he was in for half a year and pretty much got a contract off that. He didn't really do anything post that other than like beat teams that just can't play contain against running quarterbacks. Should we move? So, like, from most of the questions we've got are kind of post-season related. So maybe if there's anything else you wanted to touch on the game at all that you thought was interesting.
I mean, if you want the tale of the game, if you want the tale of the tape and basically a summation of what happened, Tyrod Taylor threw 10 accurate passes on 12 throws. He had 11 completions. Ryan Tannehill had 36 chartable, which means non-throwaway attempts. I mean, when you can win the game by running the ball and winning in the trenches, you can win any game. You can beat any team in the league with that type of formula. And that's, I think, what this franchise just misses, man. I loved watching LSU and Alabama over this weekend. I'm not saying you have to play like a 3 yards in a cloud of dust like Ohio State used to, but and you got to be physical and tough up front, and you got to just commit to it, and that's how you win football games. And I mean, unless if you have an elite quarterback, look at how much Russell Wilson's struggling in Seattle, because they haven't put the playmakers around him on the offensive line. I'm going to go a little bit of a different term there. Playmakers on the offensive line. You need to have impact blockers. Now, Brandon Albert, I thought played pretty all right. I can't think of an individual. Can you think of an individual offensive lineman that played especially poor besides Jason Fox?
No, it's pretty good.
It was a good game for them.
Yeah.
Overall. That's
Tannehill only got 1 sack. Or is there more?
I think he got 1 sack. And
there's 2 very
sacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and they're both Fox.
Yeah. And so I guess that's the positive.
He got hit a couple of times on some throws as well, just after.
Yeah. From Fox. Lamar Miller missed a block, a delayed blitz. I didn't even see. I think it was Preston Brown coming through the middle. Mike Pouncey, I know, missed a delayed blitz really badly. Like, dude just ran right past him and slammed Tannehill. But I mean, overall though, I thought it was actually a good offensive line game. Outside of Fox was just getting destroyed by Jerry Hughes on that swing move or on that spin move.
He was on the floor as well.
Yeah, it's bad.
And I guess like one other positive I'd say is Lamar Miller's hands have really improved. Like if you had told me last year that Lamar Miller had 7 receptions in a game, I'd have thought most like half of them would be like juggled. But his hands have really improved. I mean, if you go watch like Lamar Miller his rookie year to now, he is a completely different player. So kudos to Miller and the coaching staff on developing him. But he still only had 12 rushing attempts. And for like the caliber of back he is, that like really isn't enough. In comparison, like LaShawn McCoy had 16. He obviously ran for, I think it was, LaShawn McCoy ran for 112 yards, but 50 of those were on 1 touchdown play. So that can be the difference of like those extra 4 rushing yards is you just have 1 break, because the more you run, the more you give up those 3 yards. Like defensive coordinators hate giving up 3 yards every play. And that's what Lamar Miller was doing. So they overcompensate to try and take away the run, and especially the way in which Miller presses the hole here makes those, when the defense overcompensates, he exaggerates that by his patience and his pressing of the hole. So that's why you keep running him. And although him getting 12 attempts is better than 5 attempts, and granted, Jay like cut into that slightly with 5 attempts, but
yeah,
I'd like to see like a little bit more from Miller. And Ajayi probably like took some of those kind of bigger chunk plays from kind of Miller, making them try to take away the run to a certain extent. So it's getting better, but like I don't think people realize how good Miller is.
No, clearly not. Like, it's been so clear. Speaking of those guys, though, Jay sent us a question here on Twitter. How I had mentioned you'd be excited if you get, like, especially Kyle Shanahan. He specifically mentioned with Jay Ajayi, Lamar Miller, Ryan Tannehill. He would like us to kind of elaborate on that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to take this one first, Oscar?
Oh yeah. So like Kyle runs mainly a zone blocking scheme. So both of them have like good vision, can run well inside and outside zone, and then he's obviously used the zone read where you read the defensive ends, and so that's kind of using Tannehill in that way, and that takes a defender out of the box, so it makes it easier to run. And he also has a propensity to use backs in the backfield. We're seeing that with Freeman a lot at the moment, and the way Jay he is like a really great pass catcher already, and then as I was just saying, Miller's kind of developed, so you add that element, you've like pretty much got like a perfect backfield in. And the great thing with Kyle Shanahan as well is you can keep John Benton because of their experience with the Texans. I think they were together there.
I believe so as well.
And someone just asked about John Benton, saying he's a highly regarded O-line coach, yet we are here. What John Benton's known for is his run blocking. And so that's why, like, he's not going to look as good in this circumstance because they're not playing to his strengths. He learned under Alex Gibbs, who's now the assistant coach at Denver, and he's just like he just designed, and they're not really using his best plays as well. They're using too many of those pin pull sweeps that just allow free techniques to get into the backfield. So I'd rather see like those taken out and just using traditional outside zone where you're not pulling anyone, you're just driving to the sidelines. The inside zone works well where we've seen that like get a lot better with Dallas and Billy getting to the second level. Sometimes they're still a little bit late coming up onto their landmarks in the second level, but they're generally pretty good. So like Benton is a great coach. And like I think the offensive line has played. I mean, it was pretty terrible against the Patriots outside of Dallas, I would say, who had like one or two bad plays. Today, just from like the first look, it was only Jason Fox, and that's been kind of like the consistent thing. When Albert plays well, the rest of the line plays well. So you just got to pray that Albert can like look that good on a normal length week, or I think like the long week helped him, whereas the short week to Thursday Night Football kind of hurt him more, just not having that recovery time. Is there anything else with like Kyle Shanahan and the backfield that kind of enticing to you?
No, I think you covered it really well. One thing I like to just kind of as far as like the passing game is he accentuates one receiver really well, and that's kind of followed them more, him and also his dad kind of too. Everywhere that they've gone is you'll see one receiver especially with just massive production.
So you get real good return of investment on Devontae Parker basically.
Yep, and with Parker being similar to Julio Jones as far as his movement skills, maybe not talent, we don't know that yet. And I'm just saying that as you know, just out of respect to Julio Jones. But we also saw it with Andre Johnson as well in Houston. And I think that would be an exciting thing because if you look at what Atlanta's done this year, Matt Ryan hasn't played well. And yet they've still been a good team. And I think that that's a positive. I think that's a testament. Now, you do kind of worry about, the Matt Ryan thing, but that's more Matt Ryan than it is Kyle Shanahan. Remember, Kyle Shanahan made Brian Hoyer look playable for like 9 weeks before he just shit himself. Matt Ryan's just kind of going through a hard time right now. I don't know what he's been doing.
Made RG3 look incredible as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, go back to RG3. You're right. I forgot about RG3. He made Alfred Morris a good player too. I think that we're starting to see that, like Alfred Morris. I don't know what's happened to him, but he's like falling off a roof. They don't even run him anymore. They don't even play him.
He needs to play in a zone scheme, and they've moved to more power.
Yeah.
And then with RG3, you're going back to like the zone read as well. So like we're seeing less of that, and I think that's one reason why the run game's being less effective is Tannehill's not keeping one of those edge defenders blocked with his like running presence. Instead, offensive lineman has to block them. So that's kind of like one schematic difference from last year that has affected the run game. I mean, it is so weird to think that last year we had like 1,000-yard runner, and I don't think we'll get close this year. And this will be the first time John Benton will ever have a line that won't have an 1,000-yard runner.
What's Miller on pace for? Like probably like 900 or so.
Let's go see. I'd be surprised if even that. because like today he got almost 100 yards receiving and 44 rushing.
Yeah, he had like
This
15.
is probably one of his.
Did he get like 15 rushing last week, something like that? And against the
This
Bills,
is probably one of his. He's had 478 through 8 games, so he'll just be under 1,000. He might just crack it with a big run then.
Yeah.
But he's already had his big, like, 85-yard run. Whereas last year he would have been 1,000 yards without that Jets 97-yard touchdown. But he had almost 1,100 basically. But yeah, it's sad. He is probably he's almost surpassed receiving yards though from last year, where he had 275 yards receiving. He's already had 269 on 11 last receptions. So
yeah,
there's something.
obviously
And no
today,
fumble.
obviously today was pretty impressive too. That was a lot of production today. Mostly he did most of the work too.
And the Texans game, he got like that free run down the sideline.
Yeah,
50 yards. But that's interesting. He's had no fumbles this year. He had 3 last year, so that's an improvement as well.
he's been really good this year.
I guess the caveat is he's got to be extended, and it's rare that running backs go 4 years healthy in a row. He hasn't really. I mean, he's been kind of nicked at times, but he's never really missed substantial time. So,
especially with his.
This could be.
Yeah, with his history.
Kind of
yeah.
Yeah. So this could be the best of Lamar Miller, and
hopefully not. Makes me sad.
But at least Sher Jahi will maybe having those as kind of like a tandem, and you can use it like Gio Bernard and Hill, where they kind of compensate for each other. I think the Falcons want to have like a complement to Freeman as well. So I think that's kind of the way the NFL's moving. Should we do a couple more questions before we go? So this one's on head coaches from Tomville. He asked, what's the most important characteristic that the next head coach must have? So do you want to take that first? So it's kind of an interesting question in terms of like something I wouldn't really think about, like looking for a characteristic. So it's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's one set way to look for a coach. Obviously you want someone, so just as far as like the interview process, I want someone that already knows the roster really well. I want someone that's done their research, comes in with a plan and says, look, this is how X, Y, and Z players were playing. They were being either misused, they haven't been developed. Here's exactly what I can do to either upgrade that player or help them improve. I want to hear someone come in and say, schematically, this is what's going to fit the talent that's going to be on this roster for the next 2+ years. Here's what we can do for them. Here's what I've done with players like this. I want to hear people come in that are flexible not only in scheme, but also as a person. I don't want someone that's going to be like Greg Schiano. I don't want like a Greg Schiano who's just going to come in and yell at everybody, be pissed off all the time. I also don't want a guy like Joe Philbin who's just kind of one speed all the time. Like either way, it can. Again, is there and I don't mean that in just like towards the media. I think that you see like a guy like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is like that to the media, but I mean, he comes off as like a dynamic personality. Yeah, like I think that there are other ways that he communicates his what he's trying to get across, and he does it incredibly well. I think that you need to find someone that is just kind of hyper aware not only to themselves, their limitations. You don't want the guy who always thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room. And you also want a guy who can realize that, hey, I'm starting to see this trend, or, hey, we're kind of playing behind the 8 ball here because we're throwing too much. Just for example, like we're doing something that just isn't quite efficient enough. You want to find somebody that's willing to change things up, that's willing to change their identity at the drop of a hat. If they say, okay, this isn't working, what can we do to be better? And I think that's like the biggest thing is a lot of these guys. I was talking to some guy yesterday. He was trying to tell me that like the NFL hires the most qualified people. Like internet scouts aren't going to be better than NFL scouts. And I was like, bullshit. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, just because you're an NFL coach doesn't mean that you're a better coach than a college coach or a high school coach or anything like that. You need to find the right personality, though. That's the biggest thing is how you handle personalities, the opportunity that you're given. So it's just, to me, that's what I would look for. Look for a flexible person who's willing to change based off of data, based off of trends in the NFL on all levels, not only just college, but also NFL, but also someone that can hold their players accountable without being too much of a dictator or too laissez-faire.
I guess for me, I'd want to have someone that had like a distinct plan for the offensive personnel, as I think because it's so young, I think you need to like have a plan to like that has to be kind of the focus of, okay, we've got this unit, how do we make the best out of the talents on there, because you're pretty much tied into everyone offensively other than like, oh, for the next 4 or so years, pretty much, other than Stills, obviously you'll have to extend at some point. Cameron, you're either cutting or restructuring at the end of this year. Then you have like Albert, everyone else is pretty young. So that's you kind of set in terms of personnel there and like a style of play. I definitely think you need to stick with a zone running scheme. I know people will hate that because there's always the idea of like, oh, we did this last time, so now we've got to do the complete opposite. That's just stupid. I mean, most of them successful teams run zone blocking schemes, and there's just this. I think it's just because power is called power that people think it's hard-nosed football, and a zone blocking scheme isn't. Like inside zone is like you see guys going to the second level and knocking guys over on the floor as much as power. So I think that's just like the word power being misappropriated. Yeah. But I definitely want someone who has like a clear vision for the personnel on offense, and then defensively has like almost the way in which the Cardinals were last year, where they could re-envision themselves. Even though some of their key players went down, they had the flexibility to move. And because I don't think in one off season you can necessarily rebuild or get like a deep enough defense to play one way. So it's going to be tough, especially with kind of like the turnover and the question mark over kind of what Wake will look like. You're going to lose a lot of edge players. There's not really much interior pass rush other than Sue. There's really only one linebacker worth anything. If Grimes plays like today, which hopefully they just play him off the line of scrimmage a bit more, then he shouldn't be as bad as this, but we'll see. Then you really just have like Rashad, Jenkins, and Sue. That's like your core. So you need to have like a flexible plan kind of around those 3 players, how you can kind of cobble together a unit that first year. The reality is like the first year probably won't be very good. The second year probably won't be very good. I think there was someone from NFL Network tweeted out today that of all the new head coaches, there were 7 head coaches in 2014 hired. Only Zimmer has a winning record. Wow. So just because you're changing head coach doesn't like you're not necessarily going to get better. And that's remarkable that Zimmer's been able to do it, and also having a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback. So that's credit to him. And like he has the advantage that they've drafted really well at certain positions at least, and been pretty successful in free agency. With guys like Linval Joseph playing really well and stuff like that. He was really good today. But that's kind of like just for all the people that like it can't get worse. It's not going to get better for a while.
I think it could get better, just depending on. It's just not extremely likely that you're going to see a dramatic jump. You may see a jump though, because like scheduling sometimes, like if you're last place in a division,
you'll get a better schedule. Yeah, we'll definitely be last in the AFC East.
Yeah,
or almost.
So you may get like that year of like kind of like a flukiness, but you may also get like a dramatic improvement just from like players on the roster too. Like I think that could happen. Like guys like just getting playing time, like Devontae Parker, for example. Or
it's also that second year you almost have more turnover because you're getting rid of the guys who are under contract for a bit longer. There's less money guaranteed to them, so then you reshape more, and then that takes a hit. So maybe that's kind of one reason. But that I thought that was interesting, and kind of goes against like you can only do better. It's like, well,
you can go way worse. If they start changing up schemes and stuff, then it's going to be a long process.
So I'd want someone that doesn't. To me, the key attribute is someone that doesn't want to rip up the offense. That'd be the key. And then just I think what we'll see is it's going to be a pretty big name. I think Ross isn't going to want to have any shortcuts this time. Whether he has to, it'll be interesting kind of how much of the front office gets churned over to kind of enable a big name coming in, because most big names are going to want to go for full power. Obviously, Tannenbaum having like connections with Parcells, maybe that can be like smoothed over where there's some sort of compromise. But that's just another thing to kind of take into note. There may be kind of some compromises made due to power. So that's just one of the things. But then personally, I'm quite happy although it has its risks, and I would prefer a head coach to have full power than kind of like the mess we've had of late. And it means Ross can make less mistakes on kind of trying to do these short-term fixes or like bumps that we've kind of seen. So if you have one person making all the decisions, maybe, and just reporting directly to Ross, maybe that kind of takes out as like limits the amount of damage Ross can do. Like whether he means it or not, I don't think hiring Tannenbaum helped this year.
But I don't think it helped for the most part, though. I'm not sure it hurt too much. Like I know that Jordan Phillips's presence hasn't been good, but like could they have made a better pick there? Yes, but I don't think like one rookie would have changed too much of what's happening right now.
The entire interior defensive line mentality has completely changed. And whether that was because they could get Sue and then they decided to go to a different way because he's such a unique player, we don't know. Can speculate on that, but I mean, the interior defensive line has completely changed its style of play, where it used to have, for most of the time, 2-3 techniques and getting penetration. Now it's got like Sue taking on double teams and a nose tackle trying to bull rush a guy, basically. And that hasn't been hugely effective. So it's just, I probably doubt we would have Sue if Tannenbaum didn't come. So maybe in the long term it works out better, but short term, I think if Ross wanted to win this year over everything else, I think Tannenbaum was the wrong move. If he wanted to ensure winning for the longest period of time, he should have cleaned house when he hired Tannenbaum. So it's just kind of like doing half measures. So that's kind of the frustrating thing for me. So then if you get a head coach that has full control, you're no longer doing half measures. Maybe the risk is if you get Sean Payton and the first year goes kind of middling, and then the next change is to then give Sean Payton full power, and you've just delayed it a year or something like that, to give like one example. So yeah, I'd quite like to get someone with full power, just so there's like one voice and clarity.
Yeah, completely agree.
Should we see if
the only way that I will say, like, just real quick, the one way I definitely see, sorry, as I try to crack my knee, the one move that would definitely show that like Tannenbaum worked out would be Sean Payton.
Or
there's a relationship there, right?
Yeah, but it sounds like from at least Albright and a couple of other people have been saying that
he keeps saying
Hugh Jackson is his top one. And so that could be just he knows if Sean Payton comes, it would mean less power for him. And so as much as people want to say, oh, why would he care if it's still a Parcells person? It's like people want as much power as possible because power means prestige, and prestige is why people have these positions of power, is to like, and I mean, you can tell that Tannenbaum is egotistical. He was in all of the presses with Sue when like Philbin didn't feel like he needed to be. He didn't have to be in the pictures with Sue and his family, whereas Tannenbaum made sure he was visible in all of those things. That was his like declaration on the league that he's back. So that's one thing, like where he may have some pushback to Sean Payton. I'm sure he wouldn't dislike it, but he may prefer someone where he has more input and therefore can take more credit. So that, I think that would be the reason why there could be some conflict with Sean Payton, even with a dot-to-dot connection.
Oh yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
So we've got a couple more questions. This is from Brady Vernon, asking if Jalen Smith would help the linebacker core. Yes, he's really good, and the Dolphins don't have very good linebackers. He'd probably play middle linebacker, and you either play Misi at Sam, or I think if you were to draft Jalen, probably be a first round, well, almost certainly you'd have to pick him in the first round, but whether you drop down a bit in the draft off ball linebackers, I guess like of his name recognition, probably go like top 15.
Yeah. Right around like that number 10 spot, I think, is like the sweet spot for guys like him.
So it just depends where you're drafting. Maybe you could move back a couple of spots. Like the Browns always like to move up one spot to take someone bad. The Vikings not really take advantage of that, but maybe the Dolphins could this year. Have you got any takes on Jalen Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I love him. I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a real stud in the NFL. I mean, he's got some holes in his games, and like it is what it is. I mean, every player has some holes in their game, but
he's pretty rounded.
He's really good. He's going to continue to get swole in the NFL, which I think will help him a little bit. But no, super instinctive player. I think he's by far a top 5 player overall in the draft. Definitely top 10.
And you'd play him in middle linebacker in a 4-3.
Yeah. I play him middle linebacker, and I am running with him and Jenkins all day long.
Yeah.
Nickel defenses, and guess what? You now have a wonderful linebacker crew that you can do whatever you want with, especially if you can add a third linebacker. Maybe on like day 3, go get like a Montrese Overton from ECU, who's like a freaky athletic dude. Go get him, develop him to be the Sam of the future, and then guess what? Now you're playing with fire when you're facing this defensive front, because you've got 3 dudes that can play coverage, they can play the run, and you're super athletic. So that would be my plan.
My alternative to that would be to draft a safety, probably the William and Mary Cat. Then you play in base, you have Rashad in the box and 2 safeties. So instead of having a Sam linebacker, you play Rashad Jones. the closer you can have Rashad to the ball, I think the better.
Yeah.
Yes. So then, if you have two safeties that can cover a lot of space, whether that's Akins and Hudson Carson or Michael Thomas, just like I think the league's trending towards like more athletes in the field. Maybe if you can get, I think you can play Hewitt or Vigal at Sam as well. I think, or it depends what kind of defense they move to. If they go to like a 4-3 under, you want to have kind of maybe a Dion Jordan in that kind of situation where he's off ball in base and then moves down to as a down lineman. That 9 technique. So that could be like one route as well, but I'd like to see kind of like more DB packages and just like make the most out of Rashad Jones, especially with like so many teams playing horizontally. The closer Rashad is to the line of scrimmage, the more damage he can do. But yeah, I'd love Jalen. I think that'd be fun. There was one report saying, as I look forward, if we got any more questions, there was one report saying the Dolphins are interested in Barkevious Mingo because they were worried about Sue and OV having less impact with wake out. I thought it was interesting they said less impact in regards to OV, considering he hasn't really had much impact with wake.
Don't know if that's actually possible.
And
Mingo would not help with that. I'll tell you that now. Kivas Mingo sucks. He's not good at football. Okay, he's not good at pass rushing at all. He's like a total run stuffer at like 225 pounds, which take that for what it's worth.
So yeah, to me, he would be like replacing OV. So then I guess the question is, do you spend draft capital to get Mingo or money to keep OV, which is, or just neither?
I'll give you option 3, bring Dion Jordan back and give him one try. And if he doesn't work out, that's why you draft an edge player probably in round 2.
I guess the caveat with Dion Jordan is it's more up to him whether he will even be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of say that's the same though for like Mingo. Like he's had years to be able to work on this stuff, and he hasn't.
I mean, like Dion Jordan could just be the next Justin Blackman.
So, yeah. Oh, that's realistic.
Like, he's one drug test away from literally being out of the league and never playing a snap.
No, I agree. No, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. I just don't think that
games and he's played.
I just don't think that you've got a better chance with Mingo. I honestly don't. Like,
no, I agree.
If you're spending more than a 6th round pick on him, you're wasting a pick.
I'll put it. I think Tannenbaum does not like Dion Jordan though, and
which is understandable.
I think he has pretty much already given up. So I doubt we'll see Dion Jordan again, and that I don't think that's a good thing, but I think that's a reality. So there we go. See if there's any more questions. I think that's everything. Yeah, I can't see anything else. So what? I don't know. Do we have anything else to talk about? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Who's next? Who's next on the schedule?
I'm trying to blank it out. Oh, it's shoot. Who would you, out of the coaching staff, who would you keep going forward next year? I think it's a short list.
I'm not married to any, but if I'm keeping any, I'd be fine with Dan Campbell at tight end, and I'd be fine with John Benton. That's it.
I'd probably keep Duff in the 2.
Oh, yeah.
I've got the Eagles next, so they're playing at the moment. Actually, our next 2 opponents are playing right now as we're watching Sunday Night Football. So it's the Eagles going to the Eagles, and then Cowboys come to Miami, and so they're both playing now, and it's 6-7. It sounds like Romo will be back almost certainly for the Cowboys game. But, I mean, there's not really much to go on. in terms of like what we're going to learn. I guess the interesting thing is a lot of early kickoffs, so that's kind of good. Yeah, well, the next 4 games are all 6 p.m. 1 p.m. Eastern kickoffs, so 6 p.m. my time. So there'll be. Oh, that's kind of a shame because that's when most football is. So maybe missing better football to watch the Dolphins. Was there any draft prospects yesterday that caught your eye that you wanted to touch on?
I didn't watch too much. It was my stepdad's birthday, but I have to watch the first half of Cal. I've just basically been focusing on quarterbacks, just because it's easier for me to just go back and take a look at guys. But I don't like Vadal Alexander from LSU at tackle. I like him at guard, and I'm going to keep projecting him at guard moving forward because at right tackle he bends too much. He doesn't have he doesn't trust his core strength enough at tackle especially against Bama. Like that offensive line just got their ass whooped by Alabama. Jared Goff's second half against Oregon was pretty decent. I still maintain I hope he goes back, or at least if he enters the NFL, he gets a year to kind of bulk up. His receivers have been so bad. Like those dudes don't get inside positioning on any routes against Pac-12 players. Kenny Lawler has just nosedived in my draft prospect rankings, unfortunately, which is really unfortunate. He was super fun against bad competition, and then he actually faced real guys, and it's not been pretty. Paxton Lynch
Goff is definitely coming out though. There's no way he's going to stay because
that's been
stuff's going to get churned, and like you take the hope when you've got it, and he's probably going to start as well because you're going to have to spend the top 20 pick, and I think the amount, unless he ends up somewhere like the Saints behind Breeze, there's nowhere really where there's like enough job security for a head coach and someone that can succeed him or like hold position ahead of him for a year. So I think that's just the reality that he will play early, whether it's good or bad. And we've seen like Mariota looked really good today. The bits I saw, at least at the end of the game as well, that the last 8 minutes, he looked really impressive. And then obviously Teddy got hurt today, but he looked good coming in early. Obviously didn't get thrown in straight away. And I mean, I think like I still maintain like Goff and Tannehill were kind of at the same kind of level coming out, and Tannehill, although he had like bumps, he definitely is better than expected playing early. So I think, although there's negatives, I think learning in fire is when the player's talented enough is what most teams are going to do, just because it's the way that most have been successful of late. If you even look at like Luck, Wilson, they've all played early. And we haven't really had a Rodgers for a while. But maybe that's why we're not going to have someone of Rodgers' caliber again. So, I mean, it's just, most people don't have the luxury of Green Bay of having a Hall of Fame quarterback for 3 years to sit your next Hall of Fame quarterback and the coach not get any shit and be able to do that. I guess my guy, I caught up with his last couple of games, the William and Mary safety, Carson Hudson. He's really good. He's even better than I thought. These last couple of games, he's played even better, and because he's only been playing safety this year. So
is he on YouTube, or is he? Are you just watching like Watch ESPN for him?
Yeah. So yeah.
Which one? Sorry, I was asking. Are you watching YouTube or are you watching Watch ESPN?
YouTube.
YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. I find places. I watched a couple live on streams. So I don't get much in the UK. We get like 4 ESPN games on TV. So pretty much everything I'm streaming. So I make sure I have to pretty much watch SMU live because most places don't post their games unless they're against ranked competition. So then like the bigger games I generally don't watch live because Noon Kick will have them up and stuff like that. Pac-12 pretty much watch live just in case. And I have a subscription to their international YouTube thing so I can get Pac-12. But that's pretty much it. So
definitely recommend Noon Kick. I've been downloading off there heavily here recently, especially. They're fantastic.
And you can just if you're looking for any game, just search like the two teams on YouTube, and you'll find so much. It's surprising. So if you're ever looking for any prospects, and it's always better to watch. I mean, it's more important with quarterbacks, but I think it's important with every position to watch full games. Just to, like, cut-ups are great, like draft breakdown is great, what they do for like recapping and refreshing and going back over things, but to get like the full context of the game is so important.
Yeah, you should be watching full games. Just a good reminder. Absolutely. There's no, I mean, you can't simulate the feel of the game, the situational football. And it's honestly, it's kind of hard to keep up with those videos, like especially if you're charting things. It's tough, man. Like you almost have to watch those things at like half speed, which is an option in YouTube, which is a great option, by the way. I really recommend it. Is if you slow things down to like 0.75 and you start seeing like movements and how people kind of react, like that's in-depth scouting. Like that's where you really want to be as a scout, is to start understanding like subtle movements and stuff like that.
And by like full games, unless it's other than quarterback, it's like I watch like 3 full games, and then I'll watch cut-ups to see like particular matchups that are good, and then if there's one game where I want to see more, I'll go back to that game. So that's kind of the way, like, to streamline the process somewhat. But like full games are really important, so make sure you watch them. And I think that's everything. But we'll have Eagles preview. So the Eagles game will actually be pretty fun. Just to like watch Chip Kelly's offense, like drive to drive in comparison with lasers, and I think that would
be a lot different. It's gonna be a lot different.
So that will finally end that batshit crazy talk that I've had to push against for almost 2 years now. If you're wondering, they're not the same offense. If that hasn't been evidence enough for you. Not that the Eagles' offense is humming at the moment, but
big touchdown there for.
So Ian, spoiling my minute lag on football yet again. So thanks for listening, and you can follow the show at MiamiPod, themiamipod.com. If you like us and you want to make it easier for us to keep doing this, you can donate, themiamipod.com/donate. You can follow Ian at NFL Film Study and find his work at draftcentric.weebly.com. Keep refreshing so you can get the Weebly off. And that Bleach Report.
Content hasn't been coming lately, but it will here eventually.
And I don't write, so you don't need to read me. Just my awful tweets. So if you want to see my awful tweets, search my name. And like today, I use the Miami Pod's Twitter handle to live tweet the game, so I'm going to keep doing that to build this brand. So anyway, keep an eye out for that. Make sure you follow that for those. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll have an Eagles preview soon. And I'm sure we've got a myriad of guests we can bring on for that one. So maybe we'll have Ben Nathan on. I'm sure he'll be down. He's got nothing better to do. So we'll have him on, even if I haven't asked him yet, but I'm sure he'll be fine. And yeah, I think that's about it. Anyway, like, don't worry too much about football. It's all right. Goodbye.